My parents insisted I move my wedding date to accommodate a trip to Australia with my golden brother. My parents demanded I reschedule my wedding date for a trip to Australia with my golden brother and his family, but I said yes. And now they're crying because I got married without them. 5 days ago, my girlfriend of 6 years and I got married in a small, intimate ceremony. Initially, it was only going to be with our families and a couple of very close friends. But unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, my family couldn't attend. To be more precise, my family could have attended, but for them, going on vacation to Australia with my brother and his family seemed like a higher priority. My wife and I have been together for 6 years and got engaged about 10 months ago. We hadn't formally invited anyone or sent out invitations until about 4 weeks ago, but we knew when we wanted to get married and told our families 8 months in advance so they could save the date when the time for the wedding came. My parents assured me they would keep it in mind. Honestly, I didn't expect them to do what they ultimately did, but I guess I should have because I've always had a somewhat tense relationship with my parents. I grew up in a family where my brother was known as the prodigy child, and I was just the troublemaker. My brother's 4 years older than me and has always been better at everything: grades, sports, or other activities. Of course, as a child I felt overshadowed by him, but I thought that feeling would eventually fade. It might have faded if my brother had been less arrogant, but he always seemed to provoke me on purpose. He constantly teased me, bullied me with his friends, and I was a particularly small kid, so it was quite easy for him to do. I always tried to complain to our parents, but they never believed me. To them, my brother was the perfect child, probably incapable of making mistakes. That lasted a long time, and by the time I was in high school, I had so much pent-up resentment against my brother that I made an effort to cause trouble whenever I could. If I couldn't be as good as my brother, then I would be remembered in other ways. Right since childhood, I had developed a bit of a rebellious attitude, and it only got worse as I grew older. By then, my brother already had a job, and even then he couldn't stop trying to show off. One day after I graduated from high school, he said something really sarcastic about me being a disappointment or something, and I just lost my temper. I'd been looking for a fight for a long time, and that day we finally confronted each other. That was almost 10 years ago, and we haven't spoken since. I'm pretty happy about that because, honestly, I think my life improved a lot after I stopped talking to him. I think I got a lot of my anger toward him out. The day I hit him, I got pretty beat up too, but I was happy to have given him at least one well-deserved black eye. Of course, after that, my parents were very upset with me because they thought I had provoked him and started the fight on purpose. They were never willing to believe that it was always my brother who provoked me and tried to get me to fight him. Even that day, they didn't believe me. They were very cold toward me for the next few weeks, and things only started to improve when I left for college, probably because they were going to be left alone after that and wanted to mend things with me before I left. But I never forgot how they treated me, and although I kept in touch, I simply couldn't forget how unfairly they treated me compared to my brother. The only reason I invited them to my wedding was because they're the only family I have. I'm not particularly close to any of my relatives, and my grandparents, unfortunately, are no longer with us, despite our tense relationship. We had made an effort to stay in touch over the past 10 years. They also tried to get me to reconcile with my brother several times, but I don't think either of us was interested. He got married about 6 years ago and now has 2 kids. I wasn't invited to his wedding, and I didn't care at all. My parents even tried to get me to invite him to my wedding this time, but that was definitely not going to happen. I know he's still the same arrogant, insufferable brat as always, because we have to see each other during holidays when we go back home, and his behavior hasn't changed in the slightest. The only difference is that we no longer acknowledge each other's existence. I'm also still aware that my parents have a soft spot for him, but I still didn't expect them to just go on vacation with him and his family, and not even care that I was getting married around the same time. I can't prove it, but I'm pretty sure they did it on purpose because they knew that if it came down to it, our parents would definitely choose them over me, because that's what they've done our entire lives. He probably wanted me to feel bad, and somehow he succeeded, because right now I feel absolutely horrible about all my decisions. Anyway, a couple of weeks before, just as we sent out the formal invitations, my parents visited me and said they probably wouldn't be able to attend because just 3 days prior, my brother had invited them to join him on a family vacation to Australia. It was an all-expenses-paid trip as it was a perk for my brother, who had greatly impressed one of his clients and wanted to take his whole family with him, so they couldn't postpone it because my brother had already taken the time off, and my parents expected me to postpone my wedding since only friends and family were going and we were getting married at a venue owned by one of my wife's relatives. Of course, it would be more reasonable to expect me to postpone my actual wedding rather than for them to decline the trip. They said they were really excited and looking forward to spending time with their grandchildren, and they hoped I'd understand. I wanted to argue with them, but instead I just smiled and said it's fine, I'll wait. They were baffled and didn't even think I wasn't serious. They seemed satisfied with my response, so they left. I talked to my wife about it, and she was also pretty shocked because we had always known my brother was more important to them, but for them to blatantly disregard me like that was just so disrespectful. Of course, we had no intention of waiting or postponing our wedding, and we decided to go ahead with it, with or without them. So 5 days ago, around the time we were supposed to get married, we went through with the wedding and posted about it in the afternoon. That really shocked my parents because I had promised I'd wait and I didn't. When they saw the pictures, they started calling and texting me immediately, but I ignored them because it was my wedding day and I didn't even bother to read the messages until the next day. The next morning, when I woke up, I read the message they sent me, and it was exactly what I expected. They said they were very disappointed in me and didn't expect me to betray them that way. I decided to contact them and talk about what had happened, because I really had a lot to say to them, and I'm sure they could say the same about me. They didn't take long to answer my call, and as soon as they picked up, they started yelling at me. They said they had never felt as insulted as they did the day before, because everyone was shocked that I hadn't invited them to my wedding. Since I wasn't close to the rest of my family and was also a bit introverted, no one had expected to be invited to my wedding, but apparently everyone believed my parents would be there without a doubt, and were surprised to see the photos and realize my parents weren't there. So the entire family had a lot of questions. It was typical of my parents to care more about what others thought than about what they had put me through. Anyway, I decided to tell them what I thought and explained that I never intended to wait for them to return from their vacation with my brother and his family, even if I said I would, because I knew arguing with them would be pointless. There was no way they would turn down the trip with their golden child and his family, even if it meant missing my wedding. I was already busy and didn't have the energy to argue with them, so I promised them I'd wait. In my view, I was completely justified in what I did and didn't owe them an explanation. I also brought up everything that had happened in the past, how they never believed my brother was a horrible and arrogant person, and how they had always treated me unfairly. Even now, they couldn't see that my brother had specifically chosen that time to invite them on vacation because he knew it was special to me. If he could get my parents to miss my wedding, it would be the ultimate win for him. That's exactly what happened. So my parents had shown me once again that my brother was more important to them than I was. They no longer had any right to question my decisions, because I was tired of being sidelined and wouldn't let it happen anymore. I was about to hang up, but my parents told me that apparently my brother didn't know I was getting married around the same time. They said that if I had told them I wanted them to be at my wedding and wasn't willing to wait, they would have declined the trip and been with me instead. However, instead of being transparent with them, I chose to play mind games and was now acting like the victim in the situation. I didn't expect that response from them, so I decided to talk to them a bit more. They told me that apparently they hadn't even told my brother I was getting married, and since I hadn't invited the rest of the family, they didn't know either. So he had no idea I was getting married around the same time he went on vacation and had invited them without any hidden motives. Apparently, they only decided to talk to me because they knew that if they chose to go on vacation with my brother and his family, it would be unlikely they'd have a chance like that in the near future, as my brother had been very busy since starting his own business. So instead of simply turning down the trip without talking to me, they decided to ask if I would be okay with postponing my wedding for a couple of weeks. If I had said no and been honest with them, they would have declined the vacation and been with me at the wedding. As for what had happened in the past, they said they were willing to admit that in some way they had been at fault for never recognizing that my brother might have been horrible to me and that I might have been telling the truth. However, I never helped the situation because I always went out of my way to cause problems, seek attention in the most drastic ways, and try to be a nuisance in the family. So I couldn't entirely blame them for not believing me when I was trying to make it seem like my brother was always attacking me. Hearing it put that way, I couldn't help but think they might be right. But at that moment, I wasn't in the mood to believe them. So I accused them of lying about whether my brother knew I was getting married. Even if he didn't know, there was no way my parents would admit it. After I accused them of doing this on purpose, I argued with my parents, saying that if they had really wanted to be there for me on my wedding day, they wouldn't have even considered the idea of going on vacation with my brother and his family while abandoning me. They wouldn't have asked me to postpone my wedding. They would have just been there for me, no questions asked. I accused them of making excuses to cover up their mistakes and trying to manipulate me into thinking I wasn't the victim, but the one at fault in the situation. I thought they would argue with me, but instead, they simply told me I hadn't grown out of my old ways and was still the troublemaker seeking attention in the worst possible ways. Then they hung up, and I could tell they were very disappointed. My mother had been crying because it was very upsetting for her that while they were on vacation, I had posted a bunch of photos from my wedding as if it didn't mean anything. Even I was really upset and angry with them. I didn't even take the time to think about their perspective during the first few days. But now, the more I think about the conversation I had with my parents, the less sure I am that I was in the right. At first, I was very confident I had done nothing wrong, but now I'm not so sure. There's no way to prove if my brother knew when I was getting married, or if he did all this on purpose. But I have a strong hunch that my parents must have told him I was getting married around this time, and he specifically chose this moment to go on vacation with his family and invite my parents along. It's too suspicious, but that's all I have to go on my hunch, and I don't really know if what I think is true. So in case it isn't, I guess I may have been wrong in some way. But that's the problem. I'm not sure about anything. I'd still like to say that if my parents had really wanted to be there for me on my wedding day, they wouldn't have even considered the idea of going on vacation with my brother and his family, and wouldn't have asked me to postpone my wedding. However, if I had talked to them, the situation might have turned out differently. I don't know. The only thing I'm sure of is that they were right about one thing. I never made it easy for them to take my side when I was younger, because I definitely was a troublemaker and a complete brat. My brother was always the golden child, no matter how much he bullied me in private. He always excelled at everything, and that's not something I can take away from him. So maybe if I had put my energy into trying to be more like him, who knows? Maybe my parents would have found it easier to take my side. In any case, I'm really confused about all of this, and don't know if I should apologize to my parents. All my life, I've believed my brother was treated better because my parents favored him, but maybe I never did enough for myself, and maybe I'm not really the victim here. Even now, I'm not sure if my brother knew when my wedding was or not. I simply don't know anything, so I desperately need some clarity. Am I the bad guy for telling my parents I'd wait for them to return from their vacation, only to eventually get married without them? Update 1. So my parents returned from their vacation as soon as they landed. They came straight to my house from the airport. I knew because I could see their luggage and stuff when they arrived in the taxi. My wife and I have been married for just over a week now, and we've discussed the situation with my parents several times. I've also reviewed comments and spoken to various friends. A lot of people are on my side, while others think I could have avoided all this drama. But the bottom line is the damage is done, and I don't think my parents can move past it, and neither can I. So I had essentially abandoned any hope of reconciliation with my parents. Honestly, I don't even want to reconcile. It seemed pointless because throughout my life, they had always preferred my brother over me. They didn't even deny it when I mentioned it during our last phone call. They admitted it, but also tried to blame me for it simultaneously. I accepted that we had different perspectives, and maybe we were both right, or maybe we were all wrong, but it didn't matter anymore. We couldn't undo what had happened, and that's how I planned to handle the situation. But I guess my parents had other plans. When they showed up at my door, I was very confused because they still had their luggage with them, and I thought they were planning to live with me. That scared me a little, but they later clarified that they had come straight to my house from the airport anyway. I invited them in, and they skipped all the small talk and told me that based on my behavior, It was obvious that we had a lot to discuss if we wanted our family to work. I didn't know what to say to that because I really had no plans to discuss anything with them. I already knew it wouldn't make any sense, and we'd just go around in circles again. So I tried to tell them I needed some time and space to sort out my thoughts, but they said they had made the effort to come to me right after their vacation because I was important to them. So I needed to treat them with the same importance, and we had to talk about this now. I was already quite upset about everything that had been happening with my family since I had that fight with my parents, so I really wasn't in the mood to talk to them. When they insisted I treat them as important and play by their rules, I started getting very angry again. So I lashed out and told them that just because they were willing to talk to me right now didn't mean I had to do the same for them. If they really wanted to make peace with me, they should have respected what I said about needing some time away from them and left me alone. Things couldn't always work on their terms, and they needed to realize that I was my own person, not their puppet. That led to a heated argument because they were quite upset too, and eventually my wife had to step in and tell them to go home because there was no way we'd reach a conclusion this way. Before they left, my mother, who has always been the more emotional parent, told me that she was aware that maybe she and my father had failed as parents at some point, because otherwise no one would treat their parents the way I had treated them. But she wanted me to remember that if they had failed as parents, I had also failed as their child in some ways. But they had always forgiven me and tried to make it work with me. If they were important to me, I should try to do the same and make an effort to fix things instead of constantly trying to prove that I was perfect and always the victim while my family were the villains. I would have responded and said something back, but as I said, she's always been the more emotional parent, and she had tears in her eyes, so I couldn't bring myself to say anything. After they left, my wife calmed me down because I was still quite upset. Since then, we've been trying to figure out how to deal with this situation. I don't want to portray my parents as villains, but I also don't think I'm the bad guy here. I'm inclined to blame my brother for creating this situation, but honestly, I still don't know if he had any part in it. Even if he did, it was my parents' decision to skip my wedding and join him on his family vacation. I feel like I'm back at Eskio, where one not knowing what to do or how to approach this problem. Update 2. Before I get into this update, I just want to say to everyone who has suggested cutting ties with my parents, it's not that easy. If it were, I wouldn't even be on this site, and I'd have done it already. But families are complicated, and as I said, I really don't have anyone apart from my parents. It's not like they've always treated me poorly. We've had good moments too. We're just in a complicated situation right now. I can't say I'm perfect, but I also can't say that about them. So the only two options I have now are to wait for things to get so bad that I have no choice but to cut ties, or talk to them and try to work things out. I'm leaning toward the second option because, well, I'm a reasonable person. Anyway, the last time I saw my parents was 3 days ago, and it didn't go well. After that, I didn't know what I was going to do, so I just thought I'd go back to my previous approach and keep things low-key with them. My wife agreed, because we didn't have any better ideas on how to handle it. But then last night, my parents texted me apologizing for how they acted the last time we met. They said they shouldn't have pushed me or raised their voices. They should have just left me alone when I said I didn't want to talk to them. They're really sorry for what happened, but they still want to fix things with me. So they wanted to know if I'd be willing to have dinner with them this weekend. Now, my wife and I are discussing the idea. It's definitely going to be awkward. That much, we know for sure, because so much has happened in the last few weeks that there's no way we can spend an entire evening without talking about it. But I feel they're trying to make it up to me in some way, and I don't want to ruin my relationship with them. So I'm willing to give them a chance. And maybe by talking to them, I can save what's left of our relationship. It's very clear that we have many misunderstandings and communication issues, which have caused a lot of problems between my parents and me. But I don't want to lose them. I really don't. So unless something else comes up or happens in the next few days, we'll probably see them this weekend. I'll try to talk things out with them. Wish us luck, and hopefully it will go well. Update 3. Unfortunately, things didn't go well with my parents, and I regret even giving them the benefit of the doubt and going to see them. When I arrived at their house last night with my wife, my brother was there with his family. They knew I don't have a good relationship with my brother, and I think it was pretty rude of them to spring that on me, regardless of their intentions. I was obviously very shocked to see him there, and I don't think he was expecting me either, so they had lied to both of us. As soon as I confronted them about it, they said most of the problems in our family stemmed from the fact that the two of us don't get along. They claimed I thought they treated him better than me, and he thought I was a loser, still holding a grudge against him for punching him 10 years ago, though he absolutely deserved it. So the only solution they could come up with was to invite me to dinner and make us talk to each other. I immediately told them I was only there to talk to them and that I had nothing to say to my brother. For once in our lives, we seemed to be on the same page. We both started to leave, but once again, my mother started crying, saying she couldn't believe both of her sons valued their pride and egos more than family. I was about to say something, but I guess my brother had had enough by then. He told my mother that since she had agreed to go on vacation with his family, despite knowing I was getting married around the same time, she shouldn't be talking about family values at all. Then, out of the blue, he told me that our parents had been lying to me the entire time, and that he did know I was getting married around the same time he went on vacation. The reason he chose to vacation then wasn't to ruin my wedding, but because he was about to sign a new project in a few weeks after that. He'd be too busy for a vacation, so he wanted to do it while he could, and it had nothing to do with me. Just in case I thought it did, but still our parents had a choice, and chose to go on vacation with him. Now they were blaming him and acting like we were both responsible for the whole issue. With that cleared up, I knew there was no way I could forgive my parents. I think things finally reached a point of no return. I had the clarity to understand that my parents chose to go on vacation with my brother and his family on purpose, and I didn't care about their intentions. What mattered to me was the fact that they had a choice, made it, and sealed their fate, but then tried to lie and manipulate me into believing I was the villain here anyway. After that, I left and blocked them everywhere. I don't think I'll be reaching out to them anytime soon. My wife and I are quite happy on our own and are actually going on our honeymoon soon. We initially planned to wait a couple of months, but now I really need a break from all this. So that's where things stand, and I'm better off without my family. Update 4. We just got back from our honeymoon, and while I thought I'd finally get some peace after everything that's happened, especially since we took this trip to rest and find peace, I was met with a surprise at the back door of our house. There was a box with a gift from my parents. Inside, I found a framed picture of me with my parents, but interestingly, without my brother. The photo seemed old, from a time when things were simpler, or at least that's what they want me to believe. However, I couldn't help but feel this was a pretty manipulative move on their part. There was also a note attached to the box. In it, they asked me to forgive them and unblock them, because according to the note, my mother is very unwell and can't stop crying. I know this is just another attempt at manipulation to make me feel guilty, but the truth is, instead of feeling touched, I feel even more frustrated. My wife put the gift away in the closet, and for now, we don't plan on responding to them. Well, actually, there's nothing to respond to. We don't want any contact with them, and that's how it's going to stay. I think I've given my parents too many chances, some they didn't even deserve, and all they've done is lie and manipulate. And for those asking, no, I haven't reconciled with my brother either. I still think he's another part of my family I want to keep far away. I also don't know what kind of relationship my parents have with him now. He left their house very angry that day, update 5. I didn't think things could get worse, but they did. It was last Sunday afternoon. My wife and I were watching a movie in the living room. The back door was slightly open, as it usually is when we're home. Suddenly, we heard the back door open fully, and to our surprise, my parents walked in unannounced. We were startled because it's a quiet neighborhood, so there's no one who could just come in. But there they were. My mother was already crying when they saw us, her eyes full of tears, while my father looked serious. I asked them what they were doing and told them they couldn't just come into our house like that without an invitation, and especially without notice. But they didn't want to listen. They said they couldn't bear the situation any longer and needed to fix things right then and there because they couldn't take it anymore. My mother kept crying uncontrollably, begging me to give them another chance, saying she couldn't stand us being like this. I took a deep breath, and with as much calm as I could muster, I told them that in my house, only family is allowed to come in. And for me, family is my wife, myself, and the kids we'll have someday. I made it clear they couldn't cross the boundaries of our home whenever they felt like it. especially after everything that's happened. My mother broke down, crying even harder. I didn't know a person could cry that much, as if my words had shattered her heart. My father held her by the shoulders, trying to console her, but they finally understood they weren't going to get what they wanted. With no other choice, they turned around and left. Since that day, we've started locking all the doors at all times. The peace of our home is the most important thing now, and I can't allow that peace to be interrupted by anyone, not even them. We've been told to install cameras. While it's not a bad idea, we don't think my parents are dangerous, just incredibly annoying risk. After listening to today's story, perhaps it has raised some new questions in your mind, or maybe it has brought back some old memories. Every day on Reddit, new experiences and moments create fresh stories, and they connect all of us. Everyone has their own unique journey in life, and we all try to understand the world in our own way. These kinds of moments remind us that we are all human, sometimes happy, sometimes sad, and always learning something new. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to share it with your friends. Your thoughts and feedback are always valuable to us, as they motivate us to create even better content. Every story has its own unique angle, and our goal is to understand everyone's perspective and make our content diverse and relatable. Stories like these help us realize that life's journey is different for everyone, and by hearing other stories, we learn something new. You can also share your own stories with us. Your experiences are valuable to us as well, and if you enjoyed this video, please leave your feedback. We aim to create content that brightens your mind and gives you new ideas every time. If you've already seen this video before, your feedback is still important. With every piece of feedback, we can improve our content and bring a new perspective to our viewers today. What we saw was just a small part of the many stories shared on Reddit and across the world. It's a reminder of how we all try to understand life by sharing our experiences with each other. This video was only an example of how we try to connect with others through storytelling, learning about different sides of life. We hope to continue sharing such stories that help us all learn and grow together. Thank you for your time, and don't forget to keep an eye out for more stories coming soon. If you haven't already, please like and follow for more amazing content. Your support keeps us going, and we will strive to bring you more thought-provoking and heartwarming stories. Until next time, take care and stay curious. Thank you for watching. Write comments, put likes. Do not forget to watch other videos.